I was literally on one of the biggest billboards in Times Square. By all metrics, I had arrived. This is what every person essentially dreams of. And I started to notice something. It didn't really make me feel that different inside. The sense of fulfillment that I thought was going to come from that didn't end up coming. And this was an interesting moment for me because it made me start questioning the whole script that we were sold as kids. The more successful you are, the happier you're going to be.
Light, thanks for joining me.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here, Scott.
Listen, a lot of the people that we talk to that are on this show that I have conversations with are the kinds of people that are always on. They have that button that they don't know how to turn on and turn off. And in your newest book, you talk about transforming your life. You know, I think one of the first things people have to learn is how to not be on all the time. What are some ideas or thoughts that you have to that question?
It's an interesting point because when I hear being on, I equate that with I mean, it could be high energy, it could be you're playing a role that is not authentically you, and if it's the latter, then it is definitely valuable to engage in some sort of activities or practices where you do feel like you can be completely yourself. And I think that's a kind of an ambiguous concept as well, being yourself. Like, what does that actually mean? Does it mean just saying what's on your mind? Does it mean if you're an introvert, to just hole away somewhere? And I don't think that that's being yourself either. I think being your true self is who you would be if you didn't care so much about what other people thought about you. And if you were concerned about impact, if you were concerned about making a difference in the world, if you were concerned about being the best role model that you could be for the people that you cared about the most. So it's a combination of all of those things. And I have a long history with inner practices, mindfulness, meditation, etc. And one of the biggest benefits that I often talk about with that is that it allows the true you to come out. And all that means for me is the part of you that doesn't really care so much about what other people think, if you're not saying the things that they necessarily agree with or doing the things that they necessarily agree with.
Yeah, isn't it funny the power of just knowing oneself? You know, if you spend some time with yourself and you start to identify what it is that makes you who you are, what you want. You know, I talked to you pre-show about the life model. The reason I created the life model and it wasn't as cute and well put together back then was strictly because I needed to organize and be self-aware of where I was putting my time and my energy and whether I was on for the wrong reasons or the right reasons. And I think a lot of people, to your point, I love that you started with this. I think a lot of people go through life playing that role, and the role is something that they think they're doing the right thing. So maybe their parents said, you know, like you're going to go to this university, you're going to play this sport, you're going to do this, and you get into this role, and you wake up one day and you don't love who you're looking at in the mirror. And it doesn't mean that maybe you don't love the result that's coming out. Maybe you don't love all of that moment, but getting to know yourself and finding that space is so important. How do you help people find that space? What are some of the things? So you talked about meditation and all the, the calming of the brain, maybe. What are some things you're doing on a regular basis that help you even get into that right space so you don't find yourself playing that role?
Well, the most recent book I just put out, The Year You Transform, the subtitle is The Quickest Path to Changing Your Life for the Better. And when I say changing your life, what I'm referring to is becoming more you, becoming more authentically you. Now, what does that mean? It is the combination of the experience that I think most people, if not everybody, ultimately wants from trying to be successful, becoming a world traveler, engaging in relationships, right? All the different experiences that we aspire toward, there's a end goal to those experiences. And I would imagine that for most people, most of the time, the end goal is to feel connected, to feel fulfilled, to feel like their life matters. And the umbrella term for all of that is presence. People want to feel a sense of presence, right? That's why we travel to the places that are exotic, is because our awareness is heightened. And what does that mean? It means we're present. That's why we love the idea of falling in love, because it makes us feel connected to someone, and we're more present with ourselves and with them you know than we usually are when we're just going through the motions on a day-to-day basis. And so in order to get to that state of presence, we need to on some level inoculate ourselves with some discomfort. And that is the practice. That is and it's ironic, because that's the last thing that most of us wake up thinking is like, I want to be more uncomfortable today. I'm going to go get into my shower and take a cold shower instead of a hot shower. No one in their right mind thinks that way. But when you look back at your life in hindsight, a lot of times the more uncomfortable moments were the most profound moments, because those were the ones that exposed who you truly were and what you truly cared about. And you would not have known that if everything was going your way. We understand this in media. When we are scrolling through social media, when we're going to movies, binge watching, looking at shows, nobody wants to look at a show or story where everything just works out all the time for the main character. You want the drama. You want to see the arc. You want to experience the redemption with them. Yet we reject that when it happens in our own life, mostly because we're really close up to it. But that's what practices like meditation and mindfulness do, is they allow us to kind of pull back the lens a bit and see a broader perspective. And that gives us the advantage of seeing cause and effect, upstream, downstream, upstream and downstream consequences based on circumstances that we're experiencing right now. And it creates a little bit more spaciousness so that we're less quick to judge what's going on as good or bad. And we're more tempted to just say, you know what, let me just see how it all plays out. I've had enough life experience now, if I'm in my 30s and 40s, to know that even if things look like they're not going my way, usually they're gonna guide me somewhere that is going to put me in a situation where I'm going to be happy I ended up there.
Sometimes getting uncomfortable actually allows you to know that you're living and you're in that present state. So that cold plunge I do every morning. So I never wake up and go, you know what? I can't wait to get into this thing. I hate it. I don't love it, but I love the result after it's over. And I love
Mhm.
the way I feel. It's exhilarating. I'm also in a fully present state. I cannot be anywhere but in my current state when I'm in 38-degree cold water tub and I'm just sitting there meditating. And so for me, it was a practice that helped me find some more presence. It was something that I found significant for me. So that uncomfortability that you talked about kind of forced that upon me because you can't be anywhere but that. So the cold,
Mhm.
yes, it does some good stuff for the body, but for me, it actually just centers me for the day, and it's something that really helps me. The other thing I wanted to comment on is I went to Italy, 2 years ago, almost now, and my buddy and I were walking in Como to go to church on Sunday, and, we're walking through this really cool path of a street, and it's all, like, cobblestone and old, and I think we stopped, like, 5 times to look at the plants and the flowers, and, like, it's not something that either of us ever do, very rarely, at least in our current environment, and we stop at this, like, overpass, and I looked at him, I was like, "Josh, we like, think of how many people walk this every day and don't realize what they're looking at, just like we do every day, you know? We drive to work the same way, we have the same path, like, we do this, but that presence when you separate and you go into a different dynamic, a different place, somewhere that slows you down, maybe makes you uncomfortable. I didn't know where I was walking, so we were kind of enjoying the path. There was a lot to it, and it made me think of that moment because it was one of those turning points in my brain where I was like, you got to stop and see the beauty in the flowers at home too, because you're just like the people that live here that walk past this every day and don't recognize it.
100%. Yeah. We all do that, and that's the great thing about change is that you actually don't need to go across the world to have that experience. You can bring that experience where you are. You just have to be a little bit more intentional about cultivating it. And it needs to be cultivated from the inside out, usually. So, but again, it's a lot of times it's the crisis path to change that a lot of us experience that allows us to see and appreciate little things like our health. We get a diagnosis, and all of a sudden, our health is the most important thing. The thing that we've taken for granted for, years or decades now becomes the most important thing. None of the other stuff really matters. Or financial, problems. And then we start to realize, oh my God, the fact that I could pay my bills every month was a blessing. The fact that I had food in my fridge was a blessing. The fact that I didn't have to ask anybody for money was a blessing. So there's so many blessings that are happening all around us all the time. And that presence, like you said, just allows us to stop for just a moment and just appreciate it. And if it doesn't mean that you need, life is it doesn't mean that you ignore the bad things that are happening. It's just that you acknowledge all of the other good things that are always happening outside of Thanksgiving. We do it for Thanksgiving, but can we make every day like Thanksgiving? Can we normalize Thanksgiving, basically?
Yeah, that hyper gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a turning point where you started to practice more of this? Did you have a moment in your life or moments in your life where as you were going through, so people often listen to conversations like this and they're like, yeah, this sounds great. Scott and Light, they're successful, they're doing lots of great things. Like, how does this impact me? But what got you to this point? What helped you figure these things out? Or were you born this way? Were you always this way? When you were at Howard going to college in the DMV, were you this thought provoking and present?
I grew up in Alabama, and I grew up in the church, and I found that I always had questions that there were not a lot of s- satisfying answers for in church. And so after college, I moved to several places, but ended up in New York City, and I was in the fashion industry. Was trying to make my way as a model, right? And because I'd done a couple of fashion shows in college, small fashion shows like Homecoming and stuff like that, and I thought that'd be a great way to see the world. And so anyway, I'm in New York City. I'm waiting tables because I didn't have a very easy transition into that world. So I had to support myself by working in restaurants. And one day I'm waiting tables in Times Square, which is the theater district of New York. And I see this bus going down the street, and I saw something familiar, and I went closer to the window, and a couple minutes later another bus went down the street, and I saw I was on the side of the bus in a Gap advertisement. And it was so shocking because, long story short, I'd done some photos for the Gap about 3 months prior, but it really didn't pay a lot of money, and jobs that didn't pay a lot of money had a high chance of not coming out. But for some reason, the stars aligned, and the Gap, the retailer, chose me to be the face of their fall, I forget what year it was, campaign. And my face was literally, within a day or two, my face was everywhere. It was all over New York. It was all over the country. It was all over the world. But what was interesting is, because I didn't make a lot of money on that job, I still had to work at the restaurant. And so I had a dilemma on my hands. Do I keep working at the restaurant even though I'm all over New York City? Or do I quit and just take the leap of faith and hope that it's all going to work out? And I remember leaving my shift that day and walking around the corner, and I looked up and I saw this billboard in Times Square with me on it. I was literally on one of the biggest billboards in Times Square. And so by all, metrics, I had arrived. This is what every person in fashion essentially dreams of experiencing. And I started to notice something. It didn't really make me feel that different inside. Yes, I was I was excited to finally have a billboard and to finally be recognized for the work that I was doing. But it was very superficial. It was all external, and and the sense of fulfillment that I thought was going to come from that didn't end up coming. And so I thought, well, maybe it just means I need another job like this, but it pays better. And I ended up getting that job, and the sense of fulfillment still didn't come. And this was an interesting moment for me because it made me start questioning everything, really. You know, the whole script that we were sold as kids, the more successful you are, the happier you're going to be. And you just need to get all your ducks in order. And I started to dabble in yoga and meditation experiences at that time. And they talked about this thing called inner happiness, which I had never really considered before. I didn't hear that in church. Nobody talked about inner peace or inner happiness. And so I started engaging in these practices, and I started reading these quote spiritual books, and I started learning about this inner world. And that became really exciting for me. This is in the 90s. So there was no wellness scene. Nobody was talking about this stuff at the time. And and then I started to just celebrate the little things. I started to understand that the goodness we were looking for and the fulfillment was really in the small moments. Just like you said, just stopping, literally stopping and smelling the flowers and looking at the clouds and just indulging in the in-between moments of life. Now, what was different was I wasn't going around New York City saying, okay, let me stop and smell this flower. I noticed that just from doing my inner work, I just started slowing down, and I was okay not being on, like as we started the conversation talking about. And yeah, and then I realized I started looking more forward to my inner practices than I was looking forward to going to modeling castings, and that was my cue, my internal cue to move from New York to Los Angeles to go all in. And that's where I became full-time yoga meditation teacher. And that was, yeah, almost 30 years ago. I'm
It's
52, by
interesting.
the way. I'm a little older than you.
Yeah, you look great. Not much older, but we would not have been in the same high school, but I would have been
No.
right behind you.
Right, right,
I
right.
might have known your name if we were in the same area. That's how that works. Um, I think what's interesting is a couple things. Number one, just a side comment. I have a buddy of mine who's a photographer who was in New York, and he was telling me about how in the '90s how you could make so much more than today because you were on the sides of buses, you were on billboards, you were, there were all these different ways that the photographer even was cashing in on that, which I think is really interesting. Just it has nothing to do with the deeper point here, but it was just something as you were talking about. The deeper point is I think we're all wired for that results oriented success. And
Yeah.
what you find is it's fairly empty. And I started my career in my 20s in wealth management, and I was managing people's money, and I never had any money. So it was always interesting to me. I had this great gratitude and curiosity to learn and to listen and to help. But in 25 years of listening to those conversations, there's almost like a bell curve of success that I recognize. And the bell curve is when someone starts to make it, they chase stuff and they build a repertoire of garbage in their life, boats, houses, whatever. I've done the same thing. So, it's like that new money track. And then when they get up towards the top, and not everybody actually goes through the transformation. Most people stay seeking stuff and unhappy, but the ones that make that transformation to next chapter, next generation, family oriented mentality, just thinking bigger and growing, they tend to start shedding the stuff. Life slows down. They're looking for something of impact. Um, and Many years ago, the last point I'll make is many years ago, I started a practice called the habit of daily impact. And it started with having a bad day. And, I noticed I don't have a lot of bad days, but when I do, there was a way to turn it around quickly. And the way that I turned it around quickly was I started doing nice things for other people.
Mhm.
And very simple. Maybe I held the door. Maybe it was those small moments you talked about, slowing down, opening the door for someone, smiling, being at the grocery store and complimenting the girl on her nails, or thank you for working on a day you talked about Thanksgiving. I always thank people for working on those days if I need something, because it's a rough day to work. And just acknowledging that existence in other people and slowing down allowed me to get out of my own way. And so I think when you start looking at that practice, how fulfilling is it to be in that present state versus chasing the results that so many of us, including myself, were doing for so long. And last point, it's kind of cool that Gap came back. So like now when you say Gap, like Gap's popular again, like it got cool, it was uncool, and now it's cool again. So that's actually a cool win to tie it all together.
Yeah, I consider, you know, a lot of people, especially men, would consider the fact that they work hard to provide for others as, that's what I do and that makes me feel good. And I think there's some truth to that. And I would also argue that you also need something for you. You want to engage in something that lights you up inside, outside of, taking care of other people. It's admirable, it's virtuous to take care of other people, but you also need to take care of yourself. And so when you talk about impact activities, things like compliments, sincere compliments, random acts of kindness, being of service, I consider those kinds of activities to be our true health insurance, actually. And I'm not just talking about physical health insurance. It's not going to sew your arm back on if you if you have a problem with that with your arm, but it there's a protective mechanism that I've noticed in my life, that if you optimize your life for service, if you leave a service centric life or a kindness centric life, you don't get as sick as often. And if you do get sick, you heal a lot faster. You find yourself more so in the right place at the right time. And if you do happen to be in a tricky situation, you have a stronger connection to your intuition, which is always guiding you. Our intuition is like our inner GPS. And just like if we were driving in an unknown area, we would lean very heavily on GPS. A lot of times we just ignore our intuition because it doesn't make logical sense to us, but it's telling us to go to the left, and we see something shiny on the right and we think, oh, I want to go to the right. And that mentality is really a function of us thinking that our happiness is going to be on the other side of that shiny object. And it could be a goal, it could be a belief system, an ideology, an attractive person. But if our intuition is telling us go to the left, eventually we want to get in the habit of seriously considering whatever it's telling us to do, with the understanding that it always has our best interest at heart. It's always had our best interest. It's always had our best interest at heart, more so than any other person or any other thing that we've ever experienced. And we ultimately want to be loyal to that internal guidance as much as we can, because if we are, we'll see that that's how we end up in those situations that are better than we ever anticipated for ourselves, because it's always leading us in the direction of more purpose centric activities. And what does that look like? You doing something that you probably would have done for free. Maybe you get paid for it, but you do it because it makes you feel like more of yourself, and not you're not doing it just for the money. Like Quincy Jones has this really beautiful quote. He says, "I never create music for money, not even Thriller." He goes, "The moment you start thinking about money in the creative process, God walks out of the room." And I really do believe that.
When you're serving people, you're seeing the result of something that I say on a regular basis. Sometimes giving is one of the most selfish things that you can do because of how good it feels. It feels good. I also think, to your point about being kind and successful and feeling better and health wise, there's a frequency that, you know, you put out a certain energy in this world. And when you're putting out that energy and you're living at that frequency, it's amazing the stuff that happens to you. I mean, I have things happen to me all the time because the energy, and I believe this, because the energy that we're putting out into the world, my wife and I, for example, are it's an energy that isn't everywhere, but people want more of it. And we went to Puerto Rico last week and we had a dinner. And the first night we asked for the sommelier, and I just wanted an Italian red, and I didn't know the differences between a couple of them on there. And he comes over and, you know, I ask him a couple of questions. In 5 minutes, I find out that he lived in France for, you know, a decade, that he has all this experience. You know, 5 minutes later, he puts three Italian reds in front of me and is doing a full tasting. And by the end of the night, we had we and I, you know, we tasted the wines. We didn't overindulge, and it was pretty good. We were happy. We did pretty good with it. But the point I'd like to point out is, you know, we're walking out, and my wife is like, "That is so crazy. Like, how kind was that?" By the way, none of the wines were on our bill. We learned all about the human. He hung out with us at the table. We had a great time. And when we and before we left, he was like, "Hey, Saturday night, I want to do a French tasting. If you're up for it, I know you guys are taking it easy." And we both were like, "Sure, let's do it." So, you know, he repeated it. I give you this because as we're walking out, that was one of probably 10 things that happened on a 4-day trip to just separate, walk on the beach, be with my wife. And it was that frequency that I think so many people are missing, and it really comes from acknowledging someone else's existence and just being interested, not just interesting.
Yeah, and that's what everybody desires, is to be seen and heard. And we have an opportunity to do that, you know, every moment of every day. And really it's about just coming back to the present moment, you know, and allowing our curiosity to guide our conversation, our actions. Because a lot of us have that thought to ask questions, but we think, you know, they're busy. They don't want to, I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to be weird giving a compliment, and you know, but your intuition, and I call this in the book, I call it a spiritual pump. When you do things that are led by your intuition, or you could even, if that word freaks you out, your future self. How about that? Like the version of you who you've always envisioned yourself, you know, wanting to become. Imagine that version of you was coaching you all the time, and they were saying, just say the thing, just put yourself out there, just bet on yourself, just take the leap of faith, right? Just go get in the cold plunge. I know you're not going to like it, but you're going to love it after the fact, because it's going to help you get stronger, and you're going to be closer to where I am right now. And so after you do these things, you get that spiritual pump. I never forget, I was on a flight once from New York to LA. And I'm the type of person, when I go on an airplane, I bring all the stuff I need with me. I bring my food, I bring my water. I don't depend on anything uh, you know, that's provided on the flight. And on this particular flight, I was like working on something, and I had all of my stuff laid out on my tray. And the flight attendant kept coming around asking me if I wanted water, or if I wanted, you know, chips or something. And I was getting frustrated, because I was like, can't she see that I have water right here? Can't she see I have my snacks with me right here? No, I don't want your snacks. No, I don't want your water. Keep your water. And they kept coming back, you know, and maybe the fourth time she came back, I was literally about to snap. And something inside of me just said, you know what if you went the other way with it? And I said, you know what, ma'am, I just want to thank you all so much for being so attentive with us passengers. I know it's got to be frustrating when, you know, people ignore you, or they're not as receptive, and you all are going above and beyond on this flight. I've never had this much attention before. You know, I just went on and on. And she started glowing. And then as she started glowing, I started feeling more and more connected to that moment, and to that exchange between us. And at the end of the flight, I was like on a high, and she was all gracious and thankful, and that I rode that high for the rest of the day. And that conversation really only lasted like 2 minutes, but it was just interesting getting out of my own frustration and into the appreciation which is something, again, we can all do. And it's those little things. And we're talking about this happened probably 12 years ago. I'm still thinking about that. In fact, I wrote it in one of my previous books. I wrote about that experience. And I never would have imagined during that conversation, this is going to be in a book. And I'm going to be saying this on a podcast one day in 2026. But that's the power of those appreciation opportunities, is they just linger with us in a very good way.
Well, you've also been given something that you can share. And what happens is when you share that energy and you're sharing that positivity and you're sharing that conversion of mindset, because you change the frustration. I found myself just yesterday with a child in front of us. I was flying back from Arizona, and I was getting frustrated. And then I had to keep converting myself because I love children. I love that the family was sitting in the front row. I love that that father and that mother put them in that position, and the kids were all good kids. And the baby was a year and a half, 2 years old. And but my initial instance was, oh man, it's so distracting. I was trying to listen to some music and take a nap, and you know, but I kept converting. And at the end of the flight, the mother like leaned over and apologized to like the section, and I said, "How nice is it to travel with your family?" And she started glowing, and she started talking about her daughter who was a year and a half, and we had a great conversation with their family again. And when we walked off the plane, like 6, 7 people were all joyful, all kind, all excited. That energy that you shared with that young lady was something that everybody has the chance to do every day. And we have to, and believe it or not, for all of us, it's constant. We have to keep working on it, right? If it's not something that you're naturally inclined to feel that frustration, and you still are going to find yourself falling into some of those ways, but it doesn't mean that you have to stay there. And just slowing down, to again always being on, moving too fast, just slowing down allows you to find those moments, because otherwise you miss them. You go right into speed. And I want to, if you have any comments on that, feel free to. But I also want to lead us into an important part of this conversation, and I have your book here. And for those watching on YouTube, it's "The Year You Transform: The Quickest Path to Changing Your Life for the Better." And I like it how I've heard you talk about the couple ways that people think they need to change their life, and the eat, pray, love way, and these things. I'd love for you to go through that process with our listeners, because I think in today's day and age with Instagram and all these things, we have all this grandeur, all these big things we could do. But we're talking about some pretty small things that you can do right now
Mhm.
that make a big difference. And I think it ties right into your latest book.
And sometimes it's really about what you don't do as well. Like what I didn't do and what you didn't do on those flights was, we had the thought, the frustration, probably the complaint, but we didn't vocalize it. And that is a big deal, right? A lot of times we think we have to complain, because if we don't complain, if we don't say something, then how are they going to know? And there's a challenge in this book called the No Complaining Challenge, where you're asked to go 7 days without vocalizing or writing out a complaint. And that's actually, out of the 10 challenges, there's like cold exposure, forgiveness, um, purging, gratitude, stillness, etc. No complaining is the hardest challenge for people to do. I've done this, I've run this for a long time, and I've had many people go through these different challenges, and almost everyone, without exception, takes a lot longer than 7 days to get through 7 days without complaining. But what you realize when you stop trying to complain, or what you realize when you stop complaining, is you're surrounded by complainers because it's so common in our society. And that's how a lot of us bond with each other, is through complaining. Right? So much so that if you ask somebody, how are you doing? I can't complain, right? That's just a stock answer, because that's what we're so used to doing.
Right.
And, but you also don't realize how much you bring the energy down in the room when you are engaged in complaining. and how much you can lift the energy up when you do the opposite, which is appreciation or gratitude. And so when it comes to the three phases or the three approaches to change, one is the eat, pray, love, which is blow my life up, you know, quit the job, divorce my spouse. I need to just do a complete 180. And look, again, maybe there's some outliers where, you know, that has worked out really well for people. I would say most people, it doesn't go as well as they imagine it going in their mind, because they still haven't really adopted the lifestyle of the things that they say that they want to experience more of, which is more presence, more fulfillment. That stuff is like going to the gym. You can't just snap your fingers and have a six pack. You gotta earn that, and you earn it through reps. And so there's no eat, pray, love approach to working out. Okay. And the same thing is true with happiness and fulfillment and presence. So the other path, the one that we oftentimes default to because we don't want to make any kind of changes, is the crisis approach, where we keep doing the same thing. We keep putting lipstick on the pig. We keep pretending, dressing things up, staying on longer than we're able to sustain that internally. And everything starts imploding. And then that's where you get the Will Smith, Chris Rock situation, where you have somebody with all this abundance, all this wealth, all this influence, and they snap and they do something that makes everybody go, what were they thinking? Why would they throw all their reputation and all the goodness away in 2 seconds because the guy said something they didn't like? Well, that didn't just occur in 2 seconds. That was building for years and years and years. Look, I don't know Will Smith's backstory, but we all know from what he's put out there that he's, you know, gone through a lot of stuff in his marriage and in his upbringing, etc. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we need a release valve for the daily accumulated stress of just living normal life on planet Earth. That's what our inner work serves, is as a release valve, so that we can reset on a regular basis to that more curious, more forgiving, more compassionate, more connected, more fulfilled version of ourselves. And when we do that, it doesn't mean life is going to be perfect. It just means we're going to make better choices for ourselves because we're going to have the advantage of more spaciousness. And so the third path helps us do that. It helps us cultivate that spaciousness inside. I call it the tortoise approach to change, which is basically adopting the gym workout model. You have some resistance. Like when you go to the gym, you know you're going to be experiencing resistance. That's the point. You're going there to put yourself in a situation where you're going to have to experience some resistance. You're volunteering to do this, voluntary discomfort, and you understand that the payoff is that you're going to grow as a result. You're not going to like it in the process, but you're going to get a bit of a pump. You're going to grow. Your muscles are going to become stronger. You're going to go in the next day. You're going to do it again, except you're going to add a little bit more resistance to it. And there's no graduation date from this. So you may as well not, go in there and try to lift too much, or you're going to end up injuring yourself. So you got to take it very slowly, very gradually. You want to optimize for consistency. And I would say that you have to do the same thing in all other areas of life where you want to experience growth. You want to take the slow and steady approach, understanding that there's no graduation date and that you need a little bit of resistance in all areas of life if you want to expand into the version of yourself that you've always envisioned.
I love the analogy of the gym because it's one of those things where in the beginning you don't see the results right away either. So,
No.
the other part that I think is really challenging is it's the results are hidden and they're inside. Anytime I get off of my cycle, I've talked about this before on this podcast, but anytime I get off of my cycle of working out, maybe I've been on the road traveling a bunch and you get hit a lull or you're not as consistent as you want. The first thing I do is just start to build the habit again. And so I might do 15 to 20 minutes, 5 consecutive days, 6 consecutive days in a row to get myself back in. So it's that tortoise approach, that small little bite size thing to build the habit again, because what I find is once the habit's built, I miss it. But I
Mhm.
need to remind myself that I miss it. And I don't know why we all do that. We do that with lots of things that work really, really well. People talk about it in business all the time. They're like, I was doing this and it was working so good. And then they'll find themselves going, I don't know why I stopped doing that. And, it's because everything got too fast. It's also very difficult, to your point, it's very difficult to respond when you're moving too fast. So it's reactive when you're moving so fast. When you're responsive, you have to slow down to respond. I have to think about how I'm going to respond to this person. I have to think about how I'm going to respond, to this action, whatever it may be. And the worst decisions we make are very reactive on average. They're not the best decisions. So this is so helping someone understand that they don't have to blow up their life. And while Eat, Pray, Love is a great movie, it's very unique. Not many of us want that strategy. There are other things that we can do, and it's a bite-sized approach to changing ourselves. Maybe even starting with just not complaining.
Mm. Yeah. And it's not that there's something wrong with going to on a world trip and all of that. We just want to manage our expectations and don't think that going to Bali and doing the monkey forest excursion and elephant excursion and the water temple excursion is going to have a profound change on our ability to be more present in our life back home. Usually what happens is we get back home and we're kind of the same, except we have some cool photos in our camera roll that we can share on social media, but not much has changed um, internally. And so if we want to see more of our own potential, if we want to be able to see and be present with people in our life more and allow them to feel, appreciated by us, that's an ultra marathon of reps and practices that it doesn't have, it's not an ultra marathon in the sense that it's going to wear you out. It's just in terms of timing and intentionality, you have to bring that same level of patience. People say in the business world, success loves speed. And I would say that's a scarcity mentality. I get what people are saying. It means you can make a lot of money if you go faster and break things. But what do you think is going to happen on the other side of making all that money? You think you're going to be more fulfilled if you get to the money faster? No, you're going to be the same person that you were before, except now you just have more money in your bank account. And what money tends to do, again, is it exposes what's not going well inside of you, because you end up having that day of reckoning, which is, I thought this was going to be the solution and it's not. Now I'm even more depressed because I can't buy my way to fulfillment. I can buy anything I want in the world and there's nothing I want because everything I've tried it's not helping me to feel more connected to the moment. So fulfillment loves presence. It loves being in the moment. And I would say, again, go fast, do whatever you want to do in business. Just understand that there's a different protocol for being fulfilled. It's just like when you do bench presses for your chest. If you're doing that thinking your legs are going to get stronger, you're delusional. You got to get on the squat rack. And so presence is this, and gratitude and kindness and compassion. Those are the squat racks and the deadlifts for fulfillment. And you have to do that with just as much intention, just as much consistency as you do the bench pressing for success.
It's full body fulfillment. At the end of the day, what we're talking about is full body fulfillment. I've in my career transformed from doing more of the individual guidance and wealth management to mergers and acquisitions and helping advisors. The average age of someone in my industry is 62 years old, and so when there's a major gap in the generational talent and upbringing of next generation. There's also a lot of people selling their businesses. So I get involved in that. The number one thing I see, to this point that you're making, almost every day, is these individuals are getting millions and millions of dollars for their businesses, and they feel worse than they did all through the years of building it. They have not built They have been doing bench press, but not working their legs. That's
Mhm.
exactly what they're doing, because
Chicken
fulfillment,
chicken legs of fulfillment, I call it.
chicken leg, it's the worst. It's the worst. And but it's so true. It's what one of the things that launched me into writing my book was helping people establish their impact prior to making these transformative moments, because they were driving, their purpose was going all towards their career,
Mhm.
and so many other things were shrapnel on the side of the road instead. And so, to your point, you can go fast in business and you can be successful, but I probably say this every other podcast. I've given 4 eulogies in my life for all 4 of my grandparents. Not once did I mention what they did for a living, and how much money they made. I talked about how they made people feel, who they loved, what they loved, how I felt, how I grew because of them, how I learned from them. That's what life is about. And when we focus on that full body fulfillment, it's so powerful. And so, what are some of the action steps that this book provides is really a guide for people to transform their life with small changes that are exponential in results. Is that a good summary or a
Yeah,
concept?
and it's where you are right now. So this whole idea that I need to be in a different situation, a different environment. No, you don't. You can change dramatically a year from now by just doing small little things, small inputs on a regular basis. You don't have to quit your job, you don't have to leave your partner. I'm not saying that those things won't be relevant at some point in the future to transition or to relate to that person in a different way. A lot of times, here's how you know that you're the problem. You think they're the problem. And a lot of people wake up every morning thinking my partner is the problem, my job is the problem, my community is the problem. No, you're the problem. And I say that not in a sense to not in a way to shame anyone, but if you acknowledge that I'm the problem, then you also, along with that, you also have the solution. If they're the problem, you have to wait for them to do something different. If the neighborhood's a problem, you have to wait for some city council person to do something different. But if you're the problem, if the way you're engaging with that person or with that environment is the problem, you can solve that today. You can solve that in the next 10 minutes just by doing something a little bit different. Again, voicing appreciation instead of complaint. Try that. If you think your partner is the problem and you think that you're justified in complaining as much as you've been complaining, run the experiment of not complaining for 7 days. Don't even worry about appreciation. Just don't complain for 7 days and see what happens. Then, after you get through 7 days of that, add a little bit of a compliment, add a little bit of appreciation, and watch how that person changes. Watch how much more they feel seen around you. Watch how much more generous they become with you because you're the one person in their life who actually sees them for who they see themselves as, right? So you can't guess this stuff until you actually do it. Just like you can't guess how your body's going to look until you start going to the gym and start working out. It's not going to be comfortable. And so we want to get rid of the expectation that it's supposed to be comfortable and they're supposed to do it for me. No, you go first. You're listening to this episode, you're hearing this conversation. Maybe it's resonating with you. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, he's got a decent point. Okay, so now you know better. You go first.
Yep. In relationships, it's so funny. We talked a lot earlier about the energy we put out into the world. A lot of times, the energy that we're putting out into the world isn't the energy we're putting into our lives at home. And so that
We treat
challenge
our
that,
clients so much better than we treat the people we say we love and will die for, right? We talk to them like they're just like dirt on the street. And we'll turn around and treat our clients and our colleagues and give them so much grace and so much patience and apologize and do all the things, but we won't do that when we get home.
well, and I think the more unified that you live in that space, the more connected that you are to who you are. Going back to the very first thing that we started talking about today, the more your life is not a role. You're not playing a role for someone else. You are who you are, whether you're at home, whether you're at an event. I'm dressed up more than I normally would be today. We're doing we do a Valentine's Day event that we started doing 20 something years ago in our business. And I've got 200 plus women coming to the nicest restaurant in our area, where they all get a rose today. They get a great private lunch. We have an unbelievable event. Everybody looks forward to it. My mom has been texting me for like 2 straight weeks about this event. She's so excited about it. And the funny thing is that watching the energy in that room, watching how easy it is for people to feel heard, loved, acknowledged is something that we need to your point, not only implement on the outside, but on the inside. And Light, I've really enjoyed talking with you, man. I think this is just scratching the surface of where we could be going here. But in the matter of time, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to find it, so you can get this on Amazon, right? You can get it anywhere that books are sold. So,
Yep.
and then where else can they find you, Light? How can people follow you? What are some of the ways that people can, if they've liked what they heard today, they can learn from you and follow your journey?
Sure. My central hub is lightwatkins.com, and I'm on the socials at lightwatkins, Light, Watkins.
Now, Gap hasn't called you back to do any more buses.
That would be an interesting conversation,
I actually think
maybe.
it's a great conversation, because now that Gap is relevant in the level that they are, your
Mhm.
age is right on target with implementing it. And if you're working on that full body fulfillment, then you're in a good spot to be able to still do it. So, look, man, it's been awesome. Thanks for joining me on the show, and hopefully it'll be the beginning of more conversations in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciated this conversation.
So YouTube has this cool feature where they pick the next video for you, and it's right here on this screen. So I hope you enjoy this next video.